Objects. Objects. Objects are kind of like dogs in JavaScript. Cute little puppy dogs, but they can sometimes crap on your carpet. So everything in JavaScript, just about everything is an object, whether you're talking about dogs or cars, and they also have parts and actions like tails and barks and horns and transports. But everything, just about, is an object. And the way you put that together in JavaScript, the syntax for it, is with dot syntax. You string things together with dots separating them. You go from general to specific. You go left to right. So if you're talking about a dog that runs, it might be dog.run. If it's a verb, remember it's got parentheses. Dog.tail, tail's a property. So dog.tail.wag. Left to right, general to specific. That's how you work with objects. Like I said, just about everything is an object, whether it's a browser window, a document, a string, a number, a date. Everything just about is an object. When you start addressing objects in JavaScript, you might say document or document.title. Title's a property of document. You might say document.form.field.email, and email's a property of field, which is a property of form, which is a property of document. It's just kind of a hierarchy of how things are put together. Document.write is a verb or a method for document, which is the object. Write just places whatever you put as a parameter into the document. General to specific, left to right. So if you look at this spiffy chart, we have English, things and actions, nouns and verbs. JavaScript calls them variables and functions. We've seen that pretty much. But when you talk about a JavaScript object, you change your terminology a little bit. You call nouns properties and verbs methods. A variable that is attached to an object is a property. A function that is attached to an object is a method. And in English you might say a tail wags. In JavaScript you might say a tail wags. When it's attached to an object, it would be dog.tail.wag. So what is an object? An object is just a way of modeling, just a way of looking at something. You might have a spaceship as an object in a game, and it might have Blaster as a property, variable or noun kind of thing. It also might have a fire as like a thing that the Blaster can do that's a part of the spaceship. You're designing a game, and all these objects can have properties and methods. So why do we really care about this? Well, for us as web developers, we want to manipulate the objects on a web page. After all, that's what JavaScript was invented to do. You have to be able to select an object and then do stuff to it. Whether it's a window or a location or a history or a document or a navigator, all of these things are objects that we might want to manipulate. So objects are useful because they give us a way of thinking about it, of organizing. It's like a mental model of how things come together. Instead of just a bunch of stuff floating around all on their own, you can group things according to how things are organized. Dogs might have tails and legs. You might have a dog.leg.front.right, or dog.run, or dog.tail, or dog.tail.wag. So all the while, this is general to specific, left to right. And in the world of JavaScript, we have lots and lots of objects. Like I said, just about everything is an object. Each object has its own properties and methods, and you access them with dot syntax, like document.write. Now, we've seen strings and numbers and booleans, and they're all objects. But what you probably haven't seen yet are dates, and you probably haven't thought of an array as an object, but it is, and you can also create your own objects with the new object command. So you're not stuck with all the other ones that are built in. And when you have an object, it fits in the wider world of your web page or your document. And there is this thing called the DOM, or the Document Object Model, this way of putting the pieces of a web page, the objects on a web page, together, and how JavaScript thinks about things. Document's pretty straightforward in that document It means document, object, we know what objects are, and model is just a way of thinking about things. So if you look at a web page, typically it looks like a tree to the DOM, and you have HTML as the parent. The HTML parent has two children, which are the head and the body. Those elements have children as well, and grandkids, and it all comes down to nodes at some point. The smallest unit in JavaScript in the DOM is called a node, and there are three kinds of nodes that we generally work with: the element node, the attribute node, and the text node. So there we go. If you look at this kind of simple web page, we have a body with a class, you have an h1 with an ID, and you have a paragraph. And if you want to target one of those elements to do something to it, you would, general to specific, left to right, start with document. Say document, which is the object. Get element by ID, which is banner. We had an ID of banner on one of the elements in that web page, and you've just snagged yourself an element through the DOM on the page. So we have an object here. We have a method, and we have a parameter. And you're just trying to grab that element off the page so you can manipulate it. You can think of them, like I said, as methods as verbs. So the most common way of going in and snagging pieces of a web page is document.getElementById with a parameter of whatever ID you're after. Remember, there's only one ID on every web page. Only one to be valid HTML. So it returns a single element. Another common way of going in and snagging things is document.getElementsByTagName. And getElements is plural because it's going to go in and snag all the elements that you've listed as a parameter. So in this instance, it's going to select and return an array of all the anchor tags on a page. Very, very cool. You might have to go in and process things a little bit to find the exact one you're after. That's where looping comes in really handy. The last one there, document.getElementsByClassName, again, it's plural. It returns an array of elements, but it's not as, let's say it this way. It's a recent development, and Internet Explorer doesn't recognize it until the very, very latest versions, and so we have to work around Internet Explorer. All the standard compliant browsers are fine, and Internet Explorer is getting on board. So we have to be careful with getElementsByClassName and really understand your target audience before you use it. So for instance, we have some HTML, a paragraph with an ID equals copyright. To address it through the DOM methodology, you say document.getElementById copyright. And that will go in and snag that paragraph. Like I said, there are problems with the DOM because we have all the standards compliant browsers, and even they don't completely, totally agree on the DOM. The nice thing is HTML5 solves a lot of those problems, and it forces browsers to agree on things. Internet Explorer is the biggest laggard on it. So we do a lot of workarounds for IE. 9 is pretty good. 10 is going to be really, really nice as far as standards compliance. But until then, we're going to have to live with working around its limitations. Now, how all this works, you select element on a page, and then you do something. You could do almost anything. Change the property of element from red to blue. You might add new content. You might remove an element, or extract information, or add or remove class attributes, just etc., etc., etc. For right now, that's about it.